Now, Hawthorne was an author in the mid-1800s, and his three great novels are Scarlet Letter, Blithedale Romance, and this book, The House of the Seven Gables. And he's what I would call a psychological author more than an action author. Someone like Henry James is another very psychological author. We have to look at all of his novels, I think, Hawthorne's novels, all of them, to see what he's up to as an author. Now, what I want to do is situate this book a little more than we have. Hawthorne is interested in human nature. And specifically by that, what I mean is that he's interested in the parts of human nature that are permanent and that resist being conquered by any particular society. He's interested in the parts of human nature that resist us living together in peace and happiness. So his view is that unless you know human nature, you cannot know the problems that civil society will face. Hence, you cannot know really how civil society should be organized. And you cannot remedy the problems, insofar as they are remediable, in human nature. So he's looking at the soft underbelly of civil society and looking and identifying the parts of human nature that resist conquest. Now, in the scheme of things, when you look at all of his novels, there are antisocial passions, I'm going to call them antisocial passions, that he identifies. And all of these are ambiguous passions. That is, they lead toward society and they lead away from society. Take, for instance, sexual passion. Sexual passion can lead you to unite with another, and I'm not going to draw any pictures here, but it can also lead you to dispute with others over a lover. Sexual passions can be a cause of conflict. The desire for property leads, on the one hand, to the building of the institutions of civil society, and on the other hand, to the conflicts that exist in civil society as conflicts over property arise. There are intellectual inequalities. We owe much to the greatest minds, but we also envy what we owe. And there is something, especially in modern democracies, according to Hawthorne, and he might be right about this, that wants to eradicate the problems of human nature. That is, we think we can live in a perfect society if we would but conquer the problems associated with the love of property, sexual passion, intellectual and other kinds of inequalities. And Hawthorne's underlying view, I think, is that you're better to face up to the permanence, you're better off facing up to the permanence of these and other passions than trying to eradicate them. Manage them, don't overcome them. But regardless, I think, all of Hawthorne's novels deal with this issue. And they're deep novels and they're clear novels on this question. And I'm just going to give you like a quick account of each of these novels, all right, to lead us back into The House of the Seven Gables. Hawthorne's most famous novel, and one that no doubt many of you have read, is The Scarlet Letter. There are many famous aspects of this novel. Of course, the Scarlet Letter, the A, worn by Hester Prynne, being the most important of them. I think she was played by Demi Moore in the movie. Does she get naked in the movie?
No.
No? All right. So it's something that you all can see. The first words of the novel, Scarlet Letter, refer to the constant problems of human nature. Okay? And the Puritans in the novel, the Puritans, represent a human urge, and an especially American urge, to start anew, to wipe the slate clean, and start over so that the problems of the old world can be flushed away. The Puritans aspired to build a new community, united by charitable love, and they built institutions that would make love real. The Puritans wanted a pure community, a pure church. That's the name, Puritans. And they aimed at purifying the whole of the human character, body and soul. All sins, and think, especially in the context of the Scarlet Letter, think adultery, but also unbelief, were crimes for the Puritans. And the law came to reflect a strict reading of Christian morality and belief. Old Testament do's and don'ts, in other words. But all the Puritans do, in Hawthorne's view, is represent this very modern, democratic urge to overcome the problems of human nature and build a pure community, a perfect community. The first words of that novel are these. The founders of a new colony, Hawthorne writes, whatever utopia of human virtue and happiness they might originally project, have invariably recognized it among their earliest practical necessities to allot a portion of the virgin soil as a cemetery and another portion as the site of a prison. End quote. Crime and death. These are the constants in human community. You need to build a cemetery, you need to build a prison. So no matter how great your aspirations, no matter how perfect your vision, don't leave out the cemetery and don't leave out the prison. You will not achieve what you are aspiring to achieve. Each of these things, death and crime, are constants in human community. Each causes people to go a little bit bonkers. And they point to our limits in the limits in our ability to control the future. Now the Puritans are remarkable. They're remarkable in their desire to define crime rigorously. They include private crimes and crimes of the mind, and also public crimes in their definition. And their hope is that they will build a community of love, a community of believers. But they recognize that they are forced to control all aspects of human life in their effort to do so. And they still fail. They destroy the private realm. And they succeed in shaping a community of heartless, unsympathetic, grim Puritans. They were going to build a civilization of love, and what they got were grim, you know the type. People who can't smile, dance, or have any fun. And this problem is the problem that Hawthorne develops in the Scarlet Letter. Now Hawthorne is very sympathetic, I'm sure you guys all remember this from the Scarlet Letter, very sympathetic to Hester Prynne in the novel, the Adulteress. Hester Prynne had a relationship with Reverend Dimmesdale, one of the leaders of the Puritan community. And Hester has had a baby without being married. And this suggests, once again, I'm not going to draw a picture, but she has had sex outside of wedlock. And the man with whom she has had sex is Reverend Dimmesdale, but he refuses to own up to it. The first deadbeat dad. He's a hypocrite. He leads the charge against Hester Prynne, even though he led the charge in a different way before. Hypocrisy keeps him in the community. Hester is ostracized and forced to wear the scarlet A around her neck. Dimmesdale, however, notices how noble Hester appears outside the bonds of the community with her child. And he finally and truly confesses his sin. And right after it, he collapses dead. It's fantastic. Hawthorne's point here, and I don't want to oversimplify, but here's the point of the novel, is that the Puritans trusted in human institutions to save them, to perfect them, instead of in God's mercy. And hence they trusted things that could reflect human pride and human jealousy. That is, they trusted their political institutions to make them perfect. They tried to eradicate human sin, but their effort to eradicate human sin simply displaced human sin to a different place. They were against adultery. What they ended up with was lying and hypocrisy. Now, Hester, of all the characters in the book, seems to understand this problem. And she is ostracized, but she's okay with that. She would love to run away with Dimmesdale, but he is not enough of a man to do it. He is linked permanently to the community. And she even thinks, maybe I can inspire a generation of feminist reformers. But she thinks feminist reform is also folly. Here's Hawthorne writing. She, Hester, discerns such a hopeless task before her. As a first step, the whole system of society is to be torn down and built up anew. Then, the very nature of the opposite sex, or its long hereditary habit, which has become like nature, is to be essentially modified, before women can be allowed to assume what seems to be a fair and suitable position. And then Hester goes on to reflect and says, this would not even be enough. Not only must we tear down society, not only must we change the nature of men, but the last frontier for social change would require a complete change in the womanly character. A vanishment or vanquishment of her emotional and spiritual essence will be necessary, she says. And Hawthorne's Hester Prynne recognizes that the sex differences that exist in a traditional way, like the Puritans, and she does not think those sex differences should be eradicated like the Puritans. Men are simply more centered on their heads and women on their hearts. These are the facts that makes life between the two worth living. The Puritans had tried to control the heart and the head. And by doing that, they had made the joining of men and women joyless and grim. No one wants a Puritan marriage. But the same could be said of the feminist reformers, as Hester Prynne gives an account. Reducing the complementarity of the sexes will yield a different kind of Puritan reform. Changing the heart and the head. So once again, this is Hawthorne's big idea. Utopias lead to bad things. The Puritans are an example of a utopia in the Scarlet Letter, but Hester imagines the dystopian character of a feminist utopia, too. Each of them will be joyless and grim. So that's the main. This is, like I say, this is his big idea. The Blithedale Romance is a secular version of the Scarlet Letter. What the Blithedale Romance, just think about Blithedale Romance as a romance. It's a tale. It's an imagined tale about a place called Blithedale. A group of reformers, or dreamers, as Hawthorne calls them, think that the problems of human life are caused by inequality and competition in American society. And their solution is to withdraw from society and create a new one without competition and inequality. Sounds nice. Let human nature bloom, and people will not be selfish and competitive. They are made selfish and competitive only by society. That's the view of the Blythe-Dalers. What Hawthorne shows in the book is that that's completely wrong. The social conventions that lead to inequalities and that are the genuine things that make life worth living and that prevent the problems of human nature from manifesting themselves overmuch. The Blythe-Dalers become oppressive and tyrannical in their desire to eliminate inequality and competition. There's an old Buck Owens song, "Just Act Naturally." Well, when you act naturally, when you just let human nature bloom, it's ugly. You don't get peace and harmony, you get the immoral use of others as a means to your own ends. This is true in love, and this is true in property. What makes us good are the society's conventions. They improve the natural desires. Now, I'm not going to go into all the details of the Blythe-Dale romance. It's an excellent book. It's really an excellent book. But generally, the book shows that love, sexual desire leading to love, is too strong a passion. It's too important a passion and too strong a passion for society to eliminate. And hence, there will always be some kind of competition, some kind of private life that the public cannot be concerned with. Imagine living in a commune. A genuine commune like the one the Blythe-Dalers want to form is a commune of free love, by which I mean one at a time. But you end up preferring one person over others. Such passion, such attachment, rips the community apart. And it's their competition over a particular young lady that ends up destroying Blythe-Dale. And this is important for our novel that we're looking at now, this House of Seven Gables. Because what Hawthorne is arguing here is that marriage helps people realize deeper unions with other human beings. The basis for that deeper union is physical. That is, once again, I'm not going to draw pictures, but often there's sex involved. But the physical points to something deeper, a spiritual union with another. And marriage is also exclusive. Here's what I mean by that. It leaves some people out. That is, I'm married to you, which means I'm not married to you. Democracy, or I should say the urge to reform, looks at such selfishness, such exclusivity, as something to be frowned upon. But Hawthorne wants to say that the differences that lead to marriage and the exclusivity that marriage is based on cure our faults or mitigate our faults. As one person once said, marriage is a hospital, not a prison. And the patients in this hospital are more likely to get well than the patients of Blithedale. And this, I think, is the image we need to carry forward as we look at the House of the Seven Gables. Because we see in the House of the Seven Gables one character who we're going to focus on today, Holgrave, who reflects this very democratic urge to erase the past and build a new future. I think Holgrave at one point says, "We are the change we have been waiting for." And if he doesn't say it, he means it. He's going to be the inaugurator, the reformer that leads to a genuine society and that erases all the old faults and brings up a new thing. He is the character that most represents the democratic urge for perfection and control. And what Hawthorne does in the House of the Seven Gables is let us see why that democratic passion is so reasonable. Because the old aristocrats of this book are execrable human beings. Colonel Pynchon and Judge Pynchon are horrible. And you could certainly understand the urge to wipe the slate clean if the slate has been written by and owned by and controlled by men of such character and nature. But Hawthorne's motive in writing the book is not to endorse Holgrave's view that we should erase the past, but rather to get us to understand and sympathize with that aspiration in order to better control it and to better dampen it. We'll see that Holgrave himself abandons it by the end of the novel. Hawthorne is not a reformer, but he's not an anti-reformer. He wants to show us the virtues of the democratic view and supplement it with some aristocratic version of it. People in modern democracy are always out. And in this, I think Hawthorne is very much like the great French thinker Alexis de Tocqueville. People in modern democracies are about erasing privilege and inequality. That is an aspiration that we have. We're going to break through the glass ceiling or some other thing. We're always looking for the next oppression or obstacle to our equal opportunity as we see it to erase or overcome. And that is a just urge. That is an urge that reflects justice. But it is an indiscriminate urge. And it fails to take account of the good things that are associated with some inequalities or some difference. Hawthorne wants to instruct that democratic urge. So let's talk about how he instructs that democratic urge. The first thing you have to recognize in this novel is that the days of aristocracy are over. And you need to look no further than the Pincian family itself to recognize that aristocracy is dead. Look at this family and look at the shambles of the house of the Seven Gables. This is not an immaculate mansion. It is a decrepit, falling apart old building. And look at the Pincians themselves. We have 3 people from the last generation of pure-blood Pincians in the novel. 1, Hepzibah, a dour, scowling old maid with no children. That's what an old maid is, by the way. It's an old term. Clifford. Everyone thinks he's dead, but he too has no children, even after he emerges from prison. Earthquake. 3, the third and very successful Pincian of the generation, Jaffrey Pincian, or Judge Pincian, where he's introduced near the end of chapter 4. He had sought marriages with his daughter abroad, but what happens to his daughter? Dead. He seeks by stealth, not by work, to sustain the family. He has 1 son, but the son, dead. Soon after the son dies, his wife, dead. He doesn't seem to be too displeased about the fact that his wife is dead. He has no children, and that is a bad sign for continuing the family. And he is not remarried either. The old aristocracy is dead. So why worry about the old aristocracy? The tendency is to talk about dynasties. I think we even did it in our discussion group. The Bushes, the Kennedys. These are not dynasties. Everyone has had to work for a living. A dynasty is when you don't. Aristocracy is dead. The second thing that Hawthorne instructs us about is that aristocracy is alive and well. Time for laughter, laugh track. Ha ha ha. By which I mean aristocracy has been democratized. And Hawthorne shows us this in his, I would say, very dogmatic comparison of Judge Pincian, Jaffrey, the current muckety-muck of the family, and the old Colonel Pincian. Now, I have like 20 points of comparison here that Hawthorne talks about. I'm not going to go through all of them. But look at how Cousin Jaffrey is introduced. He's ugly. He's not a pleasant character. Okay? But he resembles the Colonel. And in fact, there's some confusion about whether or not it is him or the old Colonel who's painting, who is painted above the fireplace. They look alike. They are both greedy. But the judge has had to show himself to be a little more charitable, a little more liberal with his money. But he is about accumulating it too. Both the judge and the colonel appeared kind, but were really very ruthless. Though the judge had to appear nicer to others while he was being ruthless. It was thought of both of them that they were subject to what Hawthorne calls animal desires. And I think he means by that the desire for multiple women. Each man ruined his wife's happiness. Each of them, from the day they were married, wanted simply to be served by their wives. Though it's obvious that the judge was worse in this respect than the colonel, he drove her to death. Hawthorne uses these words. This is on page 130 of my edition, not 130 of your edition, so don't even bother looking it up. Both were, quote, bold, imperious, relentless, crafty, laying purposes deep, and following them with an inveteracy of pursuit that knew neither rest nor conscience, end quote. Both were powerful. But once again, there's a difference. The judge had to curry favor to maintain his power, and he did so without compromising his underlying view. So what the judge ends up being, the judge, Jaffrey, the recent Pynchon, the one who's in the story still alive at the beginning, is a democratic version of aristocracy. Someone who knows that he should rule, who thinks he should rule, someone who thinks he should lord it over others, but now exists in the circumstances where he must still get the consent of others to rule. He has contempt for the people from whom he has to get consent. He's better than they. But the circumstances demand that if he is going to rule, he has to smile. He has to hold parties. He has to give away booze on election day. But this is not someone who has either the interests or the sympathy of the common man. He holds them in contempt. You ever wonder what it would be like to run for office? I wondered this for myself a little bit. Now, in order to run for office, you have to think you are indispensable. Like, I am a very important person for this country, or this state, or this district. Without me, the destiny of the country will obviously be worse off. That is, I'm going to call an aristocratic or proud view of yourself. Now, I have to go ask these people to vote for me. You already think you're superior from them. If you are a self-conscious human being, what you have to recognize is that the superior has to ask the inferior for consent, knowingly. So what do? You drop balloons, right? You put on pro wrestling. I don't know, I'm just giving examples of things that could get the masses on my side. Right? This is Hawthorne's point. Superiority doesn't go away in democracy. It changes form. And ultimately, this is salutary. It's good that those who think they are indispensable must get consent from the many. It's good. Which means that they cannot simply ignore the many, like the old colonel could. This is a better aristocracy, but they are still ruthless. At least potentially. And I think in the portrait of the judge, and what's your impression of the judge? Good guy? No, he's one of the bad guys in the novels, right? We learn later that it is he, who has orchestrated framing Clifford for a crime, getting Clifford to spend 30 years in jail, springing Clifford in a moment of desperation so that he can attempt to secure the title to the land that the family supposedly hasn't made. He is behind all of this. He's really a bad guy. Okay? Kills his wife, his children are dead, but he could be governor, and the people love him. Right? He's a cynical man. Always holding people in contempt, but flattering them instead of being obvious about his contempt. I was telling my secretary the story about Tony Bennett. Tony Bennett, the lounge singer, or whatever you want to call him, the crooner. I saw Tony Bennett perform in Eau Claire Wisconsin in 1990 with my then girlfriend, now wife. And he played in the basketball arena called Zorn Arena. And it seats about 7,000, and there was maybe 2,500 people there. So here's Tony Bennett, who's, been to the top, I guess, playing in Eau Claire, Wisconsin, in Zorn Arena to a half-filled audience. And he sings, "I Left My Heart in San Francisco." And this is a classic, it's a fine song, I guess. I mean, I've never understood why people love it so much, but that's fine. "Left My Heart in San Francisco," he sings it, tepid applause. Eau Claire, Wisconsin, Zorn Arena, half-filled audience, tepid applause to his signature song. I could not imagine, if I were him, being at a lower point in my life. Right? I mean, I guess he could be playing a casino, no, not a casino, like a county fair with the Monkees to follow or something like that, the opening act for the Monkees, or I'm just going out there, it could be worse. But this has got to be close to the bottom. And he's done, he says to the audience, "You guys, you're something else." Which to me was his way of saying, "I hate your guts, I can't do that." That's Judge Pynchon, right? You don't show your hatred directly for people. You show it indirectly in a way that seems like you're flattering them. Very smart, very democratic way of approaching it. Anyways, that's neither here nor there. So what I'm saying with these first two things, aristocracy is dead, but aristocracy is alive and well, is that this is part of human nature. The desire, and actually, this can often be true, to be better. What can be true is that you can be better. And you can recognize that you are better. You see people walking around with their phones just on Facebook all the time. You ever see people like that? I feel like I'm better than they are. And